Oh, gracious.
Jim, I worked at a radio station, Syracuse University, and we thought we would do a promotion and give out some pizzas. Fifth caller into the station. Well, at night, the station carried really, really far. We were giving out Domino's pizzas about 150 miles away.
Wow.
For the fifth caller, and the fifth caller calls from another.
Can you guarantee delivery in 30 minutes?
That's right. Or a free pizza. There was lots of free pizzas,
That's right? You got a private jet, you might pull that off. That wasn't WSYR, was it?
No, it was WJPZ.
I see. Okay.
And it was a very small, very, very low wattage station. But I'll tell you, at night, it went pretty far. And it caused a lot of problems for us, those of us that were involved in the station, and said, hey, well, this will be a great marketing idea, We just about stalled Domino's Pizza.
Wow. That's as bad as the marketing ploy used on WKRP in Cincinnati when they tossed the turkeys out of the airplane.
The flying turkeys, for the love of God. The turkeys, they don't fly.
I thought turkeys could fly.
That was one of the greatest episodes of ever, WKRP. Okay, now you talked about a while ago, obviously back in the day, you had a lot of control spinning the records. Now,
Sure.
Okay, you do a lot of interviews.
I do.
Now, me and Vinny, we're just two guys here in the Midwest, and started a 5-day-a-week show here about 6 weeks ago, and we're in way over our head. This was
I think not. I've heard your show.
Well, I don't know about that.
Way over your heads.
Well, I appreciate that, but it's tough, trying to line up all the guests and get prepared, and you've been doing this for a long, long time. How much control do you have with your company and setting up your guests and what subject matters and things like that you want to speak about?
I've been very blessed. I have complete control. I don't recall any time that the company ever said, you can't have that person on or you can't talk about that. That's never happened.
Good.
I don't know how typical that is, but I suspect that most hosts have pretty much control. Mm-hmm. But I've had complete control, and I guess I haven't abused it. I'm sure I could cross a line, whatever that might be, that would make them do that. But I can do pretty much what I want to do, and I've been fortunate that I've been paid to do that.
That's very refreshing because we have been given the latitude to do exactly that.
Yeah. The term, I think, is enough rope to
hang yourself.
Yeah, that's
absolutely. Well, I understand that. Well, I assume you have a staff up there in D.C.
Well, I have a daytime booker because, but my hours, if I get a sudden urge to call somebody to be on my show at 3:30 in the morning, you get a lot of rejections at that hour. So there's a daytime booker who handles that. The happy booker, we call him.
The happy booker.
And I have a nighttime producer, phone answerer, guest handler, and a nighttime engineer. Right. Then for the morning show, America in the Morning, I have another producer engineer, and that's a news show, and so I'm the anchor and writer. Mm-hmm. So it's not a big budget, highly staffed production, but it works, I think.
Okay, so I know you've been doing your night show for a long time. How long have you been doing the America in the Morning?
America in the Morning goes back to, I can tell you exactly, September the 21st of 1984. So we're talking... it'll be 27 years in September.
Now, how did that come about?
Well, actually, it came about as a direct result of me getting the nighttime show, which came about because of a mechanic who left a wrench in a rocket at Cape Canaveral. Stay with me. This works. This all connects if you just go down the road here. I was working at WCFL Radio in Chicago, which was then owned by the Mutual Broadcasting System. They had a new talk show host that nobody had ever heard much about. Some guy named Larry King.
Oh, yeah. So, never heard of him.
Never heard of him. So Larry did his show from Chicago in the lobby of the local Hyatt Hotel and borrowed one of our WCFL engineers, who I discovered later spent the entire night extolling my merits to Larry during the breaks. And I thought, well, that's very nice. Thanks. Appreciate it. Thought nothing more about it. This was in early 1981. Now, in November of 1981, Larry had to be off his show one night to give a speech. Okay. His backup at the time was a guy named Jim Slade, who was later the space correspondent for ABC.
Right.
And also at the time was the space correspondent for Mutual. He had a launch at Cape Canaveral, and then the next day he was to fill in for Larry. Well, this mechanic left the wrench in the rocket. Jim was stuck at the Cape awaiting the launch, and Mutual suddenly realized they had no bench strength for Larry King. And somebody said, what about this guy Bohannon in Chicago? That is why I am sitting here with you today.
What a great story.
If I could meet that technician, I would buy him a drink. And out of that, I got the weekend Bohannon show, and while Larry was doing his weeknight show. And Larry kept wanting more time off, more and more time off, and they gave up the 5 a.m. hour. Larry didn't have to do that, but they didn't want to give it back to the affiliates because we were making money. So somebody said, well, Bohannon has done long-form news. Let's give him a show. And that's how America in the Morning came to be, because Larry King wanted more time off.
Well, those are some fascinating stories. And when we get back on the other side of the bottom of the hour break, we're going to talk about some of these fascinating guests that he's had over the years. I know he's had a lot of them. This is Mark Wright. I'm here with Vincent Finelli on USA Prepares. We're on 560 AM, the powerhouse of the Midwest. And we'll be right back with Jim Bohannon. And we're back on a very special edition of USAPrepares.com today. I'm here in the classroom with the original survival economist, Vincent Finelli, and in the studio, the living legend. Not a legend in his own mind, definitely a legend in his own time.
But in my mind also.
No.
And a former Boy Scout, so I can bring at least something of preparation to the table here.
Well, absolutely. You know, before we went into the break, Jimbo, you've been, I don't know about you, but I get people coming up to me all the time. We've been on the air only for 6 weeks. And
Is that all? Really?
That's it, 6 weeks. And people come up and they ask me, well, there was a person you interviewed a few days ago, and I can't remember, but they said this, and this, and I'm thinking, I can't remember who I interviewed 3 shows ago, much less a week ago or 2 weeks ago. Do you find it difficult to keep up with all of the guests that you interview?
Well, we keep a record. We have a log of who was on the program, which isn't always helpful when you come across people who call in like that. You had to, it was a month ago or maybe 2, and it was a guest who was talking about the thing with the thing.
Right, right.
And you're supposed to figure out what it is they want. I can only tell the audience, if you really hear something of interest, please do try to write something down, like if you hear a name, or if you don't hear a name, at least write down the date and the time. Because if you give me, for example, a date and a time, I can tell you who was on my show at that time, and I can give you the information. But, people can be rather imprecise about information that they hear on the program. So, and also, I tend to repeat a lot of things. Like if we got a certain guest, John Smith is our guest, his website is da-da-da-da-da, his phone number is so-and-so and so, and I'll repeat that enough times that it will often eliminate the need for calls like you got, because people will get the information they need. For example, here, your guest today is Jim Bohannon, and my website is www.jimbotalk.net. JimboTalk.net.
That's JIMBOTALK.net.
At .net, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, so if you can go to your website, do you stream live on your website?
We do stream live, exactly, we do. And, of course, you can hear it on one of my 500 affiliate stations. Or soon we expect an option where you can get the show intravenously. You can
really?
Put a needle in your arm.
You know how I listen to your show? On many times on my little smartphone.
Well, sure.
I got an app, and I download the app, and I listen to you at night.
That is how you can do that, which is handy on the night show because, of course, a lot of stations carry play-by-play. So if the station you ordinarily listen to carries play-by-play, you can go to that, and you can find a station that does not. For example, my Pittsburgh affiliate, KDKA. They don't carry play-by-play, so you can always hear me there.
Right.
But you're better off listening to KWTO AM 560.
Amen to that, brother. Amen.
To that, brother.
Okay, so you've done a lot of interviews. You've probably done thousands and thousands of interviews over the years. Is there any one or two or a handful of interviews that you've done that just really sticks out and that you can remember like they were yesterday?
There are a few that certainly do stand out. I remember years ago really angering Ted Kennedy. And we were in a little tiny studio, just side by side. I remember that big pumpkin head of his was glowing, it seemed like. You could have read a newspaper in the dark by Ted's head. I can't remember why now, but anyway, suffice it to say that I displeased him in some way. I don't remember why. Other interviews, James Farmer, the civil rights leader.
Okay.
One of the great leaders of the early civil rights movement, and I saw him come into the studio, and I thought, oh boy, because he looked old, he was slow, and he had gray hair, and no knock on old people. Goodness knows I'm the last person to put a knock on old people, but I thought maybe he'd seen better days. Well, physically, he probably was on the downhill run. Mentally, he was as sharp as ever, and he took us on a trip in America in the recent past, like say the mid-'50s. And I said, take us from, let's say, Baltimore to Birmingham, Alabama, and you're a black family, and how would you travel? And he pointed out how you would, first of all, you'd have to fill up your car with food, because you could not count on ever finding any restaurant any place that would serve you, and as much gas as you can, because you don't know where there are going to be places that might not fill up your gas tank. You'd have to have a pillow maybe or a blanket or something because you're probably going to sleep in your car because you can't count on finding a hotel
or find a park
find
somewhere.
The black part of town might have some rooming house could let you in, and it was a fascinating and rather frightening look at apartheid America just a few years before. So James Farmer was a great guest. Dolly, hello Dolly, Carol Channing. Carol Channing, wonderful guest. She had come to our studio straight from a performance at the Kennedy Center. Still had her makeup on. Gave me a big hug. Somewhere I still have a shirt with her makeup. Never washed that shirt. Beautiful lady. So those are a few examples. George Foreman, the boxer, fascinating fellow, and of course these days such a jovial guy, just a laugh-a-minute backslapper. And I asked him, why were you such a dour, sour individual?
Yeah, because when his younger days, he was a mean-looking guy.
Glowering face, and he said, because he grew up on the mean streets of Houston, and he said, I was always the way I am now, but you couldn't walk around the streets of the ghetto that way. You'd get cut to ribbons. He said, I had to look nasty, and that's why.
You were talking about James Farmer, and he would have made a great instructor for USA Prepares. I mean, that's what we talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, it was for a different reason.
Yeah. But his attitude was exactly the attitude that you guys have on USA Prepares, and that is you face circumstances. They may not be the ones you like, but they're the ones you face. You play the hand you're dealt. And that's pretty much the motto of this program. You play the hand you're dealt.
Yep.
Deal with it.
Yep. That's what we do. That's what we teach. It seems to work.
And it isn't always what we want, because sometimes we can all kind of lapse into a dream world, but you have to deal with reality. In today's harsh world, if you do not deal with what is, as opposed to what ought to be, you can try to make the world what it ought to be, but until it changes over, you deal with what is. And that's why I think you've struck such a resonant chord here, is because a lot of people are uncertain, and they need the guidance. Okay, this is what is. How do I live with this? Mark, Vince, help me.
Yep, and that's what's happening. People call us all the time. People call us at our homes. They email us and they say, I want a list. We go to our meetups and people say, can we do a seminar right now on survival economics? I need to know what to do right now. I can't wait for the expo. Please tell us. And that's what we do. We teach classes. We bring our instructors to our every Friday meetups. It's kind of humbling, isn't it, Mark?
It really is, because and you probably see this and you hear this. You're taking calls all night from people from all around the country. Obviously, I guess it depends upon the subject matter. Sure. But I hear you. You freelance a lot, Jim, and you have people call in and ask you about the issues of the day. And don't you find that people are kind of concerned about what's going on in the country right now with the economy, the government, crime, all these various other things?
People are very concerned. They have an idea of how things were a few years ago, how they think things should be, and they see things going in a direction that they find wrong, and they also feel helpless to do anything about it, which is unfortunate because they're not really helpless. They're not helpless, of course, in the big picture sense, because we do have votes in this country, and you can affect the outcome, and your vote does count. But from a personal perspective, they feel like they're being pushed around by vast, impersonal corporate and government forces beyond their control, and that's where USA Prepares comes in, because you show people how those forces may be real, but that doesn't mean you have to sit there at their mercy. You can, in fact, do a lot to protect yourself and your family.
Jim, there was an 11-year-old girl in Virginia. We read the story, it made the news, and she rescued a woodpecker. Did you pick up on that?
Yeah, did you hear that?
Unbelievable story.
Jim, listen to what he did.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, why don't you tell?
Well, you heard the story.
I heard the story.
The endangered woodpecker that fell out of a tree.
It was really endangered because it was about to be eaten by a cat.
That's right. That's exactly right. And Vinny here heard the story early that morning, and he was so incensed that he literally called the town. It was Fredericksburg, Virginia, and he called the commissioner of the town, and he said, well, he goes, that's not our purview. I mean, that's a U.S. Fish and Wildlife agent that's gotten involved in that. So Vinny calls the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I guess it was somewhere in Virginia or D.C., wherever he called, and he asked them what was going on. He identified himself from USA Prepares, KWTO 560 AM, and he was really upset. He was incensed by this happening to the little girl, and he said he thought that the girl saved the woodpecker and that they ought to award her a trophy instead of a citation and a threat of a court appearance. And so they relayed the message. An hour later, the director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service calls Vincent back and says, I just want you to know that we've dropped the citation. It was a clerical error, and we are apologizing to the family, and